Hi, my name is Andy Tidy and welcome back to another rather unusual and an occasional series we're going to put into Canal Hunter. I was recently watching a webinar on Zoom and it was about the CRT's estate of reservoirs. There's about 90 of these things, which really quite surprised me, and in some ways they are the jewel in CRT's crown, but they are an unrecognised jewel because they're mostly hidden away from view. So this webinar really reawakened my interest in the reservoirs. So I thought it would be really interesting to go and take a series of walks around them, to have a look at the reservoirs, have a look at the history, have a look at the natural setting where they are. So I hope you enjoy this series, and will take us all over the country from time to time. But with over 90 reservoirs to choose from, where should I start? Well, in this occasion I decided to start at the top. And when I say top, I don't necessarily mean the highest, but I do mean the biggest. And the biggest one is right near our home here at Chasewater. Now you may remember this reservoir from the start of Series 4. It sits bang in the middle of the Canal Coalfield. So going around here, it won't surprise you to know that the history of this reservoir is completely linked in with the exploitation of the local coalfield. And what a day to start out. After days and days of cold and snow, we've finally got a crisp, sharp day, sunshine, blue skies, and a sprinkling of snow just to add a little pizzazz. So let's go. This reservoir really was a mega structure of its day. It's absolutely vast. It's about 3.5 miles around. I'm going to have to consult my notes to get the facts right here. So it's 270 acres in expanse. It's got an average depth of 11 feet. I'd say 3.5 miles in circumference. It contains 4.4 billion litres of water. Yeah, that's billion. And it was enough water to supply a staggering 13,000 blocks. For those of you more familiar with the BCN, compare that to the Rotten Park Reservoir, which contains a measly 4,500 lockfuls. The reservoir was built by the Worley and Essington Canal Company to supply their canal, which ran in an east-west direction between Wolverhampton and Lichfield. Truth be told, I rather think this reservoir was built to proportions that was bigger than was strictly necessary, but then the canal never did really live up to its trade expectations. The Canal Company identified this location as the ideal place for their big reservoir, and they built it up here on Norton Bog, and they scraped out the valley around Norton Bog on the watershed, and they built the big dam here behind me, and they built a longer but lower embankment over on the western side. The reservoir opened for business in 1797, but within just 2 years of it being opened, there was a massive summer storm. The water lashed down and the water level rose. It overtopped the back of the bank just behind me here, and the whole thing collapsed. Water gushed out, billions of litres, and it raced down the valley, smashing everything in its way for 4.5 miles. For those of you who know the area, it reached all the way to Shenstone. Well, the canal builders didn't stop. They pulled up their muddied socks and they rebuilt the dam. They built it bigger and they built it stronger. And the one they built is exactly the one that you see behind me. The resulting dam is 1,840 feet long, 46 feet high, 49 feet wide at the top edge, and 230 feet thick here at the bottom. On the lake side of it, it's faced in with limestone, but even all of this construction doesn't really stop it leaking. It's always leaked a bit, and that leak has just got worse and worse over the years. Now, this leakage has largely been caused by the mining in the area. Right where I'm standing is the site of the old Marcus Colliery, and of course the coal measures extended out underneath the reservoir, and they followed them. And now, although they were a long way down, nonetheless, in the end, the ground above collapsed and it took down the dam a bit with it. And even today, water is flowing through. The reservoir has gone through a number of iterations over the years. These days it's known as Chasewater, but before it was Canal and River Reservoir. But its first name, and the name I like best, is simply Norton Pool. And that's the name you find on all the old maps. Now, like most of CRT's dam, this one is very much a product of its age. It was constructed as an earth dam. They scraped up all of the soil and the gravel from the valley behind me, the old Norton Bog, and they threw up the walls. But to make it waterproof, or an attempt to make it waterproof, they installed a clay centre. And the clay centre goes all the way down to the firm ground underneath and rises right up above the waterline. By and large, this approach to dam making works pretty well. But when it goes wrong, it really goes wrong. Think of Toddbrook Reservoir. Well, the dam goes through regular inspections, and in 2006 an inspection revealed that water was building up underneath this earth dam in a very dangerous way, and the expectation was it was going to blow out, flood down the valley again. So they had to drain out the reservoir, rebuild this section, and they strengthened this back wall, and they installed drains. So even today the reservoir still leaks, but instead of building up a head of water inside the earth dam, it's allowed to flow away down the Crane Brook, keeping everything nice and safe. Now, you may have noticed at this point in the video there is something of a continuity issue. You see, when I started to make this video, it was wickedly cold. It was a sunny day, but the wind chill factor was about -10. And in the end, in spite of it promising to be a lovely day, a huge snow shower came over and obliterated everything. So we got halfway round and we gave up. Well, we're back, but it must be a month later and spring has well and truly arrived. The ducks are out, the birds are singing, and there isn't a trace of frost anywhere. Anyway, back to the story. Now, the Worley and Essington was a canal with mixed fortunes. It never really found that its carrying trade lived up to expectations. But in the end, the Birmingham Canal Company merged with the Worley and Essington Canal, not for its trade, but for its water. And the water it particularly wanted was here at Norton Pool, which you now know as Chasewater. The Birmingham Canal was incredibly short of water, and this pool is absolutely enormous, enough for literally thousands and thousands of lockfalls. A silver bullet, if ever I saw one. Now, it turned out that there was a very large but somewhat deep layer of coal out here on the Cannock Coalfield, and the discovery of this coalfield coincided with coal running out in the Black Country. So no sooner had the two canal companies merged than the exploitation in this area really took off, and that was when the northern reaches of what was by then the BCN came into their own. This exploitation of the Cannock Coalfield was centred on the Cannock Chase Colliery, and that was located right on the edge of Norton Pool, exactly where I'm walking now. In fact, if you look at the old photos, there are enormous mounds of spoil. They've all been regraded into the area and it's all quite pretty, but what I'm walking on is colliery waste. But the colliery didn't have just one pithead. There were numerous pitheads all along the line from here almost to Hensford, and they were connected by a mineral railway. And this mineral railway collected all the coal and moved it back to the industry in the Black Country. Now, a walk around Chasewater Reservoir is absolutely possible, but you have to pick your routes. You see, it's not for no reason that this area used to be called the Norton Bog. It's the watershed. If you have a drop of rain lands here, 50-50 chance that it might go down to the River Trent on one side or down to the River Severn on the other. Of course, That means the ground underfoot is very marshy in places. And seeing as we're walking across the old pithead area, it's an appropriate point to let you know just how much coal was being taken out of this pit. Now, the amount of coal being extracted from this particular area was massive. In the 1890s, 3 million tonnes a year were being pulled out. By 1933, that had risen to 5 million. But these volumes were short-lived. As you'll have gathered from my previous videos shot in this vicinity, the coalfields were played out just after World War II. The last operational colliery in this group was the Littleton. That closed as late as 1993, but by and large this was all gone by the 1950s. And at this northern extremity of our circumnavigation around the Chasewater Reservoir, we're standing at the second of the stations on the Chasewater Railway. This was an old mineral line built in the 1800s and operated through until the pits were closed in the 1960s. These days, the 2-mile route carries thousands of passengers around the northwestern side of the reservoir, and it's one of the area's major tourist attractions. Well, that's pretty much the end of the journey. The lake has taken us about an hour and a half to get around, including some filming, but these days, apart from just being a muddy old canal reservoir, it's a really lovely nature reserve. These days, the reservoir is one big amenity for the local people. It's got a sailing club on the far side, powerboat club, and an activity centre where there's all kinds of water sports going on. The visitor centre was started back in the late 1950s and it's been developed over the years. But it's not all thrills and spills. The centre has also got a massive amount of wildlife. I mean, there's the birds you can see here, but there's so much else around the sides. In fact, a lot of the area is classed as an area of special scientific interest. So if you fancy coming out here to Chasewater for a couple of hours, I can thoroughly recommend it. Anyhow, there is one final little gem at the end of this trail, and that's where I'm going to go next. Well, in some ways, we've saved the best for last, because as we've come here to the visitor centre, there is a certain tang in the air. It's a hoppy smell, and it's the Beowulf Brewery. It's an independent brewery that's running for 20 years, so we're going to go and see if we can top up on the supplies. Well, that's it for this reservoir ramble. Anyhow, for now, cheerio, and until next time, goodbye.